So we're live here on August 7th, Tuesday evening, and I apologize to my guests for a moment. There is a software bug in the streaming software that is particularly difficult to deal with, and my cameras are out, unfortunately. So today I am pleased to have with me Jim Breslo from the Hidden Truth Show podcast, which is coming to us from Las Vegas, and I'm going to try to restore my cameras. Jim, everyone is looking at your smiling face. How are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Jason, and good time to talk about the Las Vegas shooting in light of the police report that just came out.
Absolutely. I'm delighted to have you back, and we've got a very special guest with us tonight who wishes to be addressed simply as Susan. And Susan, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you, and thank you for having me on.
It's wonderful to have you. I know you've been through quite a lot. You were a vendor there at the Harvest Festival, the Route 91 concert that we've all heard so much about. And I apologize. This is, I've said many times this week that there's been a software update that I think everybody knows sometimes these updates are more problematic than they are helpful. So while we wait for the software vendor to rectify this issue, unfortunately, I am a bit of a slave to the, well, we got a little bit of a lopsided camera there. Let's see if we can fix that. So we're going to be talking today, Susan, about the incredible experience that you had. Why don't you give us a little bit of background as far as exactly what was going on there at the concert when you arrived, and just sort of tell us the story, if you could.
Well, this was my third year as a vendor at this concert, and it's really a fun concert with a lot of very upbeat, happy, pretty much patriotic people. You see a lot of first responders, tons of military, and for the most part, just a real upbeat, happy group of people that are there to have a good time.
Of course.
And as I said, we were happy to be back there for the third time.
Mm-hmm. And so you had a booth at the concert. You were selling country western clothing, is that correct?
No, I was primarily selling boots, and we had a few other odds and ends, but our primary product is U.S.-made boots, and that's why the boot you see is an American boot. We actually had boots that look like that boot.
Uh-huh.
And
right. So give us the details of exactly what happened.
It was a great concert. It really was a lot of fun. And I think there was approximately, when they talk about the numbers that night, that's way off, because I know from our sales and I know from the number of people that we see, I'd say that when they talk about 22,000 people, that may be the 22,000 tickets they sold for the full concert. Mm-hmm. But by Sunday night, I would say that at most, based on our sales, 8 to 9, maybe 10,000 people max.
Right.
So I think that number was way off.
Right. And we've seen from HDR CFX Cornwall, who's a YouTuber that specializes in 3D visualization, he actually took little digital mannequins of people and sort of positioned them in the area there and demonstrated that it would be difficult to fit 20,000 people in there, and it was between 6,000 to 8,000 seemed to be the maximum that could fit in that space at a given time. So as you've just said, it's very likely the number of people that had been there over the course of several days. So tell us exactly what happened once the shooting began. How did you first become aware that there was an incident going on?
Well, if I can, let me just give you a little bit about my background, because
Sure.
That'll help to explain a lot of... Hello?
Yes, absolutely.
Am I still on?
Absolutely. Can you hear us?
Yes, yeah. To start with, I am a senior citizen. I'm not going to reveal my age. That would be too embarrassing, but I'm seriously old. And my background is I was a reserve police officer in Long Beach, California in the 80s, early 90s. And I was also, my past, I was a trauma nurse. And also, I was a member of InfraGard for 8 years following 9/11. I was actually a sector coordinator, and I was able to go to tremendous number of training seminars that were targeted towards anti-terrorism situations. So we had to do a lot of role playing in a situation where we would have to take charge if there was a terrorism attack. So my background really came in incredibly handy that night. So I have to say that nothing I said or did that night was anything other than really good innate training.
Right. Now, Susan, InfraGard is not something that I've heard of before. What is that exactly?
Well, it's, it's funny that I should have to even bring this up, but it is a division of the FBI. We had an FBI agent that was our coordinator. So I actually have some pretty good knowledge about how the FBI runs. And what it was is the private sector would have people that are cleared, security clearance, and you would represent different private sector groups like the electrical companies, school districts, and I represented the medical community.
I see. Okay.
So,
and I should tell everyone watching that, you and I have been communicating primarily through email. We've had a few short phone calls, but I'm learning about this incident for the most part right alongside Jim and our viewers. So it's very interesting to hear about your background. Please continue.
Well, it just came in it was just ironic that I'd had all that background. And even though obviously I haven't had to use it before, it just everything you do just becomes almost naturally. You don't even realize you're doing what you're doing.
Right.
So to go to that night, about 10 o'clock, we knew the concert was going on and we were starting to pack up, getting stuff ready for the next day. And I had a friend that was working for me that night. And I just want to preface it by saying that the sound system was not the greatest. And the reason I say that is because although we could hear the concert where we weren't that far away. We could hear the concert, but it certainly didn't interfere with the ability to have a normal conversation without yelling. So nothing was masked. We didn't have any masking of sound, so everything I heard was very clear. And I think it's kind of important to put that out there.
Yes.
Now, our booth was directly down from the stage, so we were one of the first booths past all the food vendors. So we were about as close as you can get to the stage without being a food vendor, but back far enough where the sound system that wasn't so great didn't interfere with our ability to communicate, and we didn't have to yell, and it was just, in fact, you could hardly make out the words. It was so bad, the sound system.
Wow. And we're seeing your booth, I believe, in this photograph that you've sent. It says Western... What does it say on the booth here? I see...
it's Strictly Western.
Strictly Western. There it is. We see it right there.
Yeah.
Everyone can see it where it is relative to the Mandalay Bay.
Now, the interesting thing is the angle of that whole venue was such that you can stand in different directions, and because we took pictures of the booth in front of the Mandalay Bay, I'm not a picture taker, but my friend who was working with me is an avid photographer, and she took pictures with the booth standing right in front of the, can't think of the name of the place with the pyramid.
The Luxor, yeah.
And it's got the Luxor, and it's got the abacus, and she was able to take a picture that looked like the booth was right in front of the Luxor. And the reason I say this is because it was a very odd angle. so a lot of the stuff that occurred, I think it was because of the strange angle between the venue and the Mandalay Bay.
Uh-huh.
So we were basically packing the boxes, getting stuff ready, and it was right around 10 o'clock, and all of a sudden I heard what sounded like an explosion. And I said to my associate, I said, wow, that sounded like a car crash. And no sooner did I say that, and I heard a shotgun, and it sounded like a 12 gauge. Then I heard another shot, and then a third shot. But it sounded like a 12 gauge, then cocking it, and 12, the shot again, cocking, shot again. And I know about 12 gauges. I used to have to qualify with the 12 gauge when I was a reserve police officer. So that was the first 3 shots sounded just like a 12 gauge shotgun.
Wow.
And and they were coming from, it was hard to tell. It was sort of behind us. So you could tell they were sort of behind us. And my associate stuck her head out. Wow, what was that? We were both saying, wow, what was that? I wonder if there's a gangbanging shooting going on. And she stuck her head out of the booth. Now, the booth is made out of trestles and canvas, so we're not talking about anything very protective. This was canvas and trestles. I mean, you could put a pin through the walls. And within seconds after that, there was a pause after the 3 shotgun shots, and then all of a sudden, it sounded, I mean, I'd never heard this kind of shooting before, automatic fire.
Right.
And just, I'm kind of not certain of the time frame right at that point, but it seemed like within seconds, people started running past the booth and pouring into our booth. And immediately I just told everybody, duck and hide, just get down. And, people weren't really listening, and I'm screaming at them, get down, get your head down, get down.
Yeah.
And so we were on the floor, and right in the middle where you see the booth that you've got the picture up there now behind that orange thing was a table, and a few people dove under the table, and my associate dove under the table. So she was under the table for the whole shooting, and I was as you're facing it, to the right-hand side, right under where the bullet holes are. And so I kept the people down, and I kept saying to them, just stay down until we get the all clear from the police department. Well, the shooting stopped, and a whole bunch of people got up, and I'm begging them not to leave, but they insisted on running out, and there wasn't anything I can do. So I stayed down. I told the rest of the people that was there, stay down, and the next thing, the shooting started again. Now, the second time, it sounded closer, and I had no idea where it was coming from. It almost, at that point, felt like there was somebody on the grounds shooting at us. And so the second burst of shots, another slew of people came running into the booth. And this time I got pretty mad. I said, you stay down and start pulling boxes to cover the front of the booth, or if you're not going to listen to me, get the hell out of my booth. I was really angry at that point because I didn't want them to leave.
Right.
And so they kind of listened. And I actually identified myself at that point as a retired police officer. So I said, if you're going to stay in my booth, you're going to listen to me. So they did. And I had a lot of hysterical people in there. I mean, hysterical. And I told the guys, I said, I want you to grab boxes of boots and start sticking them in front of the booth, because we don't know if this person is going to come marching down shooting, and if we're hiding, at least maybe we've got a shot. So the guys grabbed the whole box of boots, and they stacked boots in front of the booth, and we had some Mexican girl under the table screaming, crazy screaming, and I'm thinking, if these shooters are on the ground, they're going to hear her.
Right.
So we're trying to get her to be quiet. She wouldn't be quiet. So finally, I crawled to the ice. We had an ice chest under the table. I crawled to it and grabbed what I thought was a bottle of water. It turned out to be a bottle of Coca-Cola. And I gave it to my associate. I said, you either tell her to drink it or throw it at her, but she's got to be quiet. And she finally quietened down. And then the shooting stopped, and then it started again. And each time it sounded like it was closer. Now, I thought about it later, and I think what was going on was initially they shot close to the front, and as people were running away, they were aiming further back. And I think that's why the shooting sounded like it was closer each time.
Huh.
And
so, but you don't feel like there were multiple shooters? We've heard so many different eyewitnesses testify that they felt there were shooters all around them. Joe Napoli has said that. Stephanie has said that. Many people on other YouTube channels, people on, Jim, on your show, people have said that there were multiple shooters all over the place, right?
Well, from my perspective, I can tell you I heard shooting from one direction. It was just one direction. It did sound like more than one weapon. It sounded like there was at least two weapons, possibly even three. But it was all coming from right to left. And it didn't sound like it was all over the place. It was coming from one direction. Because I'm lying there on the floor thinking, why isn't there return fire from the police officers?
But do you feel, Susan, like it was coming from the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay?
Oh, at that point, I didn't have a clue. I mean, at that point, I'm thinking worst case scenario, the shooter's on the ground, and I've got to take care of these people if the shooter is on the ground. And that's why, you know, I really didn't even think about it. Right. And I'm wondering, why are we not getting any return fire from the police officers?
But you said you felt like it was coming from right to left. Is that correct? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
It was coming from north to south, basically, as we were facing, the way we were facing. So I'm lying on the floor facing the exit of the booth, and it was coming from my right-hand side.
So that is consistent with coming from the Mandalay Bay?
Absolutely.
Okay. Fair enough.
Absolutely. So after the third volley, and, you know, if I'm trying to describe this to anybody as to what it felt like, I'm going to tell you it seemed like having an MRI. Because it just seemed like you were in an MRI, having an MRI. It's you have the volleys, it stops, the volleys, it stops. And it was the exact length of time it takes for an MRI. So I figured it was about 15 minutes. And we were lying there, and people were listening. They didn't leave. And all of a sudden, we have a security guard comes to the booth yelling, if there's anybody in there, I want you to get out and run.
Okay.
And I said, no, we're good here. We're fine. We're going to wait for the police. He says, no, the police told me to tell everybody to get out and run to the exit. Now, we had an exit directly across from us. So that was gate 5.
Okay.
And people, you know, they complied, and everybody got up and started running towards the exit. I don't run so good. And I told this nice young man that was a security guard, listen, you go, guy. I said, I can't run. And he said, no, ma'am, I'm going to stay with you until we get out.
Wow.
So we get to the exit of the gate, and there's a police officer standing there with a rag to his neck that was bloody, and he's just standing there giving directions for people to go. He's telling them to go towards, to get out of the gate to go south. And I said to him, listen, I'm a trauma nurse. Where are all the people that are injured? And he just kind of cocked his head back and said, they're all behind me. And I'm like, what? So I went behind him because where I was standing, I couldn't see anything. And lo and behold, I walked out. I'm standing on Reno or Giles. I never know what, it's one name and then it becomes something else.
Right.
And I look out in the street, and the street is covered with people, sitting, lying, So
right near
all of a
this
sudden-
church, correct?
Yeah, right, yeah. And there were, the only thing that was between them and the Mandalay Bay was 2 police units just sitting there. So I went out in the street and started going into into triage mode.
Right.
And I'm walking up to people, okay, where were you shot? In the arm. Let me look. You're okay. Just hold on to your arm. You'll be fine. Going to the next person. Where were you shot? In the leg. Okay, let me look. Yeah, you'll be fine. Finally, I got to somebody that was lying on the ground, and there was a woman with her, a young woman with her. And I said, where was she shot? And she said, shot in the back. And I just went straight down. And this is the hard part. Anyhow, I started to assess her. And shot in the back, I mean, that usually means spinal injury, and I was really concerned that she had spinal injury. So my first thing was to see that she had a clear airway, that she could breathe, and I'm taking her pulse. It was really thready. Her airway was completely clear, and I asked her, I said, you know, can I talk to you? And she was like, yes, yes. So I'm thinking, good, she's conscious. And I said to her, listen, babe, I want you to move your feet for me. And I'm stroking her hair, and she started screaming at me, don't touch me, don't touch me. And I'm thinking, this is good. I've got a reaction out of her stimulation. When somebody's in shock, you need stimulation. And I'm thinking, good, she's mad at me. I'll be able to, you know, just keep her mad at me. So I just kept stroking her hair, and the more I stroked her hair, the more she got mad at me. And I said, you'll be fine. The ambulance will be here soon. And I said, please move your toes for me. And she actually wriggled her feet. And I'm like, yay, she doesn't have spinal injury. Maybe she'll be fine. And I'm waiting for the ambulance with her. I'm waiting. It was just horrible. And while I'm on the floor waiting, on the road waiting for her, I look up and I see a car coming towards us. And I'm thinking, they're going to run over us. And just as I'm thinking that, I have to tell you, these ex-military guys and military guys, they were just incredible. They were so selfless. They were running around, pulling their belts off, giving it to people to use as tourniquets. They were literally taking their shirts off and giving it to us. I mean, they were amazing. And this one military guy says, is there anything I can do to help you, ma'am? And I said, yeah, stop that car. And he literally ran in front of the car to stop the car, and it was people that had left the concert, I guess, and were trying to get away, and he saved us from being run over. So.
Wow, yeah, there's got to be chaos going on.
It was chaotic. But I think the one thing that doesn't seem to go away is the incredible silence. It was so silent. It was so quiet. Nobody was crying, screaming. There was a lady doctor there who was a guest, and people were screaming for her, but there wasn't much she could do for anybody. She was just really out of her depth because we didn't have anything to work with. I mean, we didn't have IVs, we didn't have tourniquets. I mean, we had the
didn't
tourniquets,
even have
but
bandages.
we had nothing else to work with.
Yeah.
We had nothing. And I'm looking at this girl, and I'm thinking, she's got to get to the hospital. She's going. She's in terrible shock.
And she was bleeding, obviously.
All of a sudden, there was a white truck there, and people jumped out of the truck, and they said, does she need to get to the hospital? I said, stat. And they picked her up and threw her in the back of the pickup truck, and I'll never this is the part that I was thinking about this interview, and the look that she gave me of, you got to go with me, and I'm like, I can't get up on the back of that truck. And she just gave me that look with her blue eyes, such betrayal. And she didn't, I looked at her and I said, oh my God, I wish I could go with her, because I knew she wasn't going to make it. And of course she didn't.
Wow. So this was not an ambulance, just to be clear. This was just someone at the concert who had a pickup truck, picked up this woman, put her in the truck, and the woman, she just wasn't obviously thinking clearly. She just wanted you there with her for some reason. And
oh, she was in total shock, and I mean, she couldn't move at that point, and I could, I mean, the look she gave me of it was kind of like a pleading look.
Right.
and there was nothing I could do. So.
And how did you learn that
and
she didn't live?
Even make it to the hospital.
How did you learn
that? She was one of the first ones as listed deceased. Mm-hmm. And I recognized her picture. And later I discovered that we were both of the same faith when I went to her memorial.
She was Jewish.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I went back to, once they took her away, I started going back to trying to help people, and quickly realized that the most important thing is the ambulances weren't coming, and I had a white truck right across the street in the handicapped parking lot. And I thought, I got to go get my truck. We got to get these people out of here. And in the meantime, these military people were knocking down fences and converting these fences into gurneys for the injured. It was unbelievable. And so I'm thinking, okay, I got to go. I have the car keys back in the venue. So I said, fine, I'm going back in the venue. So I got to go in the venue, and the policeman stops me. I said, no, I'm going in there to get my car keys. We got to get these people out of here. And he's screaming at me at this point, you're in the line of fire. And then I heard this, 1 down, 2 suspects.
Over the police radio, you heard that?
No, I heard it from the policeman standing there, yeah. 1 down, 2 more suspects.
Interesting.
And he said to me, he said, you're in the line of fire. I said, I don't care. I'm going back in to get my keys. And he said, okay, go, go, go.
Wow.
And, well, I don't go, go, go. I just go. And I went back in and started searching for my car keys, for my purse. Couldn't find my purse. And then I realized that my associate must have grabbed the purses when she ran out. And I was hoping that she might have gone to the truck. So I remember standing in the venue and looking around and thinking how quiet and still and weird it was. It was just weird. And then I started going back to across the street to go to my truck, and by the time I went back out again, there were just twice as many more people out in the street.
So the parking lot,
I could
Susan,
see a police helicopter on the circling the Mandalay Bay.
Oh, really? So the parking lot,
I could see the police.
The parking lot is closer to the airport, right? In between the concert venue and the airport?
The parking lot is right next to the church.
The church, right.
So I was right, where I was on Reno was right, across the street from where my car was.
Right.
So I went to my car hoping that my associate would be there. And unfortunately she wasn't, and I didn't have my telephone. But there was a couple hiding behind my car. And turned out he was an LA County firefighter. And I said, listen, and there was a couple of people, I think they were police officers, off-duty police officers. Anybody here who can get their cars out, we're begging you, please, we've got to get somebody to evacuate these people.
Right.
And I'm thinking, well, I got to get the car keys. So I said to the fireman, listen, here's the number from my friend. Do you have a phone? Please call her. And they did. And thank God she answered the phone. And she was a couple of blocks away, so somebody escorted her over to the parking lot. And one of the first responders jumped into the car with us. And there was a fence all the way around this place. And I have a big Ford truck. I just gunned it and took the fence down.
Wow. Well done.
Took a chunk out of my car. I still got scratches on the side of the car where the fence scratched up my car, and went over the curb. I didn't care. The truck. And when I got out on the street, all the people were gone. They were all gone. And I said, where's everybody gone? And they said they've taken everybody to Hooters. So what had happened was all these young military guys who'd converted fences into gurneys carried the people to the parking lot at Hooters, because you could get through to Hooters without going, I guess you could go through the back way to get into Hooters. And that was the closest property that would have been protecting everybody from any more shooting.
Right.
And that explains why all the ambulances eventually, when they finally got moving, ended up at Hooters.
Right. Yeah. It's actually quite close to the venue.
Yeah, it was the closest empty parking lot that was far enough away to give the injured some sort of protection, from what I understood. Well, I could not find how to get to Hooters on the road because I was heading to Hooters.
I'm familiar with that area. It's a little bit difficult because walking, you can go through parking lots. Joe Napoli and I did that. You can go through the Tropicana parking lot to get to Hooters, but by car, you have to go out to the Strip and kind of go around a lot of roads.
Oh, it was ridiculous. It was impossible. And now 45 minutes has gone by and not a single ambulance, and I'm screaming, I got to get to Hooters. I got to get to Hooters. And I'm on the road going around the corner on Giles, and a policeman stopped me. I said, I'm trying to Hooters. And he said, you can't go. And I'm like, why not? And no sooner did the words come out of my mouth and I could hear all the ambulances. It sounded like a movie. I mean, there were ambulance sirens coming from every single direction in Vegas. And so I looked at my associate and I said, listen, best thing we can do is get the heck out of here and let the ambulances get there and do their job because we're just in the way now.
Right.
So we were staying at the Ellis Hotel, which is directly behind Bally's. And because we were already out in the street, we were at the hotel within 10 minutes. I mean, we were able to scoot right to the hotel. And what was weird, and this might, I don't know, I'll mention this because this was very weird. We come in, we were on the first floor, we were staying on the first floor of the Alice Hotel, and as we're walking up the hallway towards our room, people were running down the hallway screaming, there's shooters out in the Strip. And we're going, no, the shooters are down, everything's fine. And they're screaming and running down the hallway, and we just went into our room. We thought, wow. So this was quite a ways from the Strip. So I mean, that just kind of dovetails into other people's stories. I didn't hear any more shooting at that point at all. And we went to the bar and sat in the bar for an hour and went back to the room and watched TV for several hours. I didn't hear another single shot the rest of the night. So,
wow.
And then the next morning, I said we were supposed to leave to go back to Arizona, and I said, well, let's go over to the venue and see what the deal is in terms of getting our belongings. And we got within a block of where I always get confused whether it's Reno turns to Giles or Giles turns to Reno, but we were a block from where it turns in front of the venue, and they had it all blocked off. So I drove up to the police officer that was blocked off, and this was interesting. And I said to him, look, I'm a vendor over there. I need to know what the deal is about going back and getting our stuff. And he said, good luck. His words exact to me was, good luck. He said, the venue is now this is 7:30 the next morning.
Right.
Good luck. The venue is now under the control of the FBI, and even LVMPD is not allowed onto the venue.
It's quite strange, isn't it?
I thought that was very odd, especially with my background, because supposedly I thought they work with the local police, but they literally took over the whole site. Even the local police were not allowed on the venue. They were only being used to control traffic to and from the area.
It's very interesting. So Jim, let me turn to you for a moment, because on your show and in your work, you've been following very closely the interactions between the LVMPD and the FBI. And with this most recent release, it seems like Lombardo has now contradicted the FBI.
Yeah, certainly in his press conference, he contradicted the FBI. So just to kind of bring people up to speed, the FBI's investigation is still ongoing. They had originally promised a completed report by the one-year anniversary, October 1st. that was just recently revised, and now they're promising something by the end of the year. The Las Vegas police issued a preliminary report back in, I believe it was February, and now just this past week has issued a final report. I have a contact at the FBI, or excuse me, at Las Vegas police, who told me that the FBI had to review that report before they would allow it to go final.
Wow.
And he also told me, when I asked him about, for instance, people who've been following this know about the missing hard drive and the fact that there were 3 cell phones found in the room.
Right.
And I was asking him, are we going to find out the contents of that cell phone, the contents of the hard drive that was found, et cetera? And he basically said that has been in the possession of the FBI from the beginning. So that was taken out of the hands of Las Vegas police. And that's one of the reasons why in the Las Vegas police report that just came out, Lombardo, the sheriff, was very clear to say that we do not know his motive. We may never know his motive. We don't know his motive. We just believe that he was the sole shooter.
Right.
The FBI, on the other hand, is saying that they do believe that they will be releasing what they believe to be his motive when they issue their report. So FBI, based on information that they have, which would include the cell phones and the laptops and the hard drives, etc., apparently has a beat on his motive, but
Wow.
Las Vegas police does not.
And of course, you're talking about the hard drive taken from a laptop computer found in the hotel room at the Mandalay Bay that was occupied by Stephen Paddock. And we've heard so many different reports, including that there were 3 females in the room there with him. Of course, at first they were saying he checked in on the 28th, but it actually turns out it was the 25th or the 26th. There been so many changes to the story throughout, haven't there, Jim?
Oh, yeah, that's what has kept our show going for so long. We've been investigating this for 6 months, putting out a new episode each week because it just keeps getting more and more interesting. And it's primarily as a result of mixed up stories coming out of Las Vegas police, Sheriff Lombardo in his initial interviews. For instance, 3 different stories about how Paddock died. At one point, they said that the police, what was the word they used? And anyway, they intervened with the suspect. In other words, that the suspect was still alive when the police met him. So the first story out of Lombardo was that the police killed Paddock.
Right.
Then the next story was that when the police broke down the door, they observed Paddock kill himself.
Right.
And the final and third story, the one they're sticking with, is that he was already dead when they knocked down the door.
It just doesn't.
They have multiple timelines regarding when the shooting started, when Campos engaged with the shooter. First, they said it was Campos who was the one who stopped the shooting. In fact, it appears now that Paddock, under no duress, ended the shooting himself and killed himself. So that's another one of the big open questions is, why did Paddock stop shooting? And why did he kill himself when he did?
The open question for me is, why the hell can't the police get their story straight? You'd think these things are dramatically different outcomes. It's not like a slight whoops, you know? So that's very strange. And real quickly,
I'll give you one potential explanation. Obviously, there's multiple potential explanations as to why the police story has changed so many times. One of them is the fact that we learned recently, as a result of all the documents and information and body cam and so forth, that the police have finally released. After they fought the courts for so long, the Nevada Supreme Court ultimately ordered that they must release this information.
right.
Lombardo then pulled the information out. He made sure that most of it came out after his reelection. He was reelected recently.
Terrible.
And just after the reelection is when we learned that, in fact, Las Vegas police were on the 31st floor during 4 to 5 minutes of the shooting. So in other words, they were directly below Paddock, knowing he was on the 32nd floor, knowing that he was shooting on innocent people, 2 police officers standing there, and as one of them put in his report, he admits that he froze. Now, Lombardo never disclosed to anyone that Las Vegas police were actually within a floor of the shooter for 4 to 5 minutes. The public, the press, our show, we had to figure that out through the release of documents without any explanation from Las Vegas police. And now, when Lombardo is confronted with that, he now acknowledges that that's true, even though he never acknowledged it before. And he makes excuses for his officers' behavior on 31st floor, and he says that you don't bring a knife to a gunfight, implying that all he had was a revolver and Paddock had automatic weaponry. But all the experts that we've spoken to, they said, you know what? In that situation, you absolutely bring the knife to the gunfight, because there's innocent people being shot at, and you've got a sworn duty to protect and defend, and that's your job. You've got a bulletproof vest. He had a partner with him. He had armed security guards from Mandalay Bay, and they froze on the 31st floor.
Yeah, I'm a retired police officer. I have to concur. I don't think I would have thought twice.
Absolutely crazy. So, Susan, tell us a bit more about what you discovered after you returned to the venue the next day.
Well, we were never allowed to go back on the venue. So that was the end of that. And we were basically told it's going to be several weeks before you're allowed back on the venue. So we decided we hadn't had any sleep, and I said, we'll just spend the night here and head back to Arizona tomorrow. And actually it was on the way home, and at that point was when I found out that the young lady had passed, that I just had a basic meltdown. And that was a pretty rough ride home. But the way I deal with things was, one of the things I needed to do was try to figure out what actually, I wanted to know more information about what happened, and we weren't being told anything. So just to cut a long story short, two things that I think should be brought up and mentioned. One of them is that I had communications with one of the officers that was on the 32nd floor. And we texted back and forth. I really don't want to go into too much detail because I don't want to get him into any kind of trouble. But he was definitely one of the heroes. And he told me that he was co-opted into one of the SWAT teams, and there were actually two SWAT teams there that night, going through the hotel and through the floors for many hours. So they must. I didn't ask him any questions. I just got whatever he told me, and I just left it at that. Because he and the group that were up there, and he sent me a picture of a bunch of the officers that had gotten together, really had tremendous PTSD because they felt terrible that they couldn't do more. So, I think it's important to share that, because they may have issues with management, but individual officers, for the most part, they may have been there's an idiot in every group, but the person I talked to was definitely a hero, had done his job, and was co-opted into one of the SWAT teams. And I thought it was interesting that they had two SWAT teams at the Mandalay Bay for several hours, which tells me they were looking for somebody else.
Right.
Even though I didn't come out and ask that. That just tells me that. I think that's just basic policing 101. Otherwise, why were there two SWAT teams up there? One of them was an FBI SWAT team. So that I thought was very interesting. The other thing was, and this was a couple of months after the shooting that I communicated with this person. The other thing was, I decided to do some independent research on Mr. Paddock. And we had limited information. Obviously, we knew about where he lived in Mesquite, Texas. We knew he lived in Mesquite, Nevada. And at any rate, a personal friend of mine is a private investigator and has all the databases, so we decided to sit down and do some research. And this is just research we did. I'm not coming to any conclusions. It's just basic research. Going back to when he lived in Mesquite, Nevada, he co-owned a multiple residency property with a Pakistani who was, to say the least, very anti-American, because he published anti-American newspaper.
Huh.
He was just not he was not pro-American. That's all I can say.
His last name wasn't Awan, was it?
You know what? I don't remember. It's been a year since we did this research, but that was his business associate. So just for kicks, I said, well, let's look at how far away the mosque was from the property, and we noticed it was 4 miles. So then we took every property the Paddock owned subsequently, and it was ironic, but every property was in about a 4-mile radius from a mosque.
That's interesting.
Now, it may not mean anything, but I just thought that was a very interesting piece of the puzzle, especially since ISIS repeatedly took credit for the shooting.
Right.
And I thought this was very interesting. The other thing is, there was a collage of photographs of Paddock and Mary Lou, whatever her name is, on the internet. And they'd only been together for 2 years, so these were relatively recent pictures. And the second or third pictures that I saw, I said, I know where that is. I was just there. I recognize these buildings. That was Abu Dhabi. So they had just recently been to Abu Dhabi.
Huh.
That's just another piece of the puzzle, because the pictures that were taken were right in front of buildings in Abu Dhabi, and I had just been there like a few months before, so I immediately recognized those buildings.
Well, and of
So
course,
then we started.
sorry to interrupt,
go ahead.
Susan, but many of us have seen, of course, this photo of Mary Lou Danley in Dubai. So obviously they made some trip to the UAE.
Yeah, that picture, she's standing in front of that funky-looking Sail Hotel. That's Abu Dhabi. That belongs to the.
I'm afraid I must correct you.
Sheikh
This is the Burj Al Arab Hotel. I've been inside there, and it was
that's
Dubai.
Abu Dhabi, and I was just there.
But unless there's a duplicate in Abu Dhabi, this is a hotel in Dubai. We'll have to check that out, but I trust you.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Dubai. Because Abu Dhabi is the next one along. You're correct. Yes. Dubai. Yeah, I'll take it back. Dubai.
No problem.
I'm sorry. That was me wrong. But that's 50 miles from. I'm blanking. But anyhow,
it's driving distance to Abu Dhabi
the
for sure. It's the Burj Al
I have
Arab.
pictures of me standing right there, which I thought was really ironic.
Yeah.
And so we decided, okay, so we see that he's close to all these mosques. There's pictures that he's in the Emirates, whatever. I mean, just following threads. That's what you do when you're doing investigations. And we looked through every mosque in their Facebook pages and everything. Couldn't find anything. So eventually we looked at his last residency, which was Mesquite, Nevada.
Right.
And ironically, the closest mosque to his house was in Reno. And it wasn't actually a mosque. It was a community center / mosque in Reno. Mm-hmm. And it, just by the looks of the pictures and so forth, it was pretty secular. I mean, the women weren't separated like in some of the other mosques. And so we started looking at my friend has a huge television screen.
Right.
With the computer. I mean, it's huge, and, he's got all this freeze frame stuff because he does Sub Roses. So we're looking through the pictures, and by golly, we find 2 pictures in the mosque of somebody that looked just like Mr. Paddock.
Wow.
So what we did, I mean, it was kind of, there was some question, but what we did was we went and got the known pictures of him that were on the internet and just kind of, did real stupid sleuth stuff like measuring his nose and measuring his head and comparing it to the 2 pictures we saw. And we're about 90% sure it was him.
Wow. Interesting.
So,
let me take you back to the
apparently
venue
he had
for a
some
second.
Islamic connections.
Right. I don't mean to interrupt you, Susan, but let me take you back to the venue for a second, because there were some additional photos that you sent me that I think are worth investigating. And specifically, the one I'm looking at is this one in your booth. Now, so you say you couldn't go back there the next day, but there are photos that you've sent me that were taken after the shooting. When did you take these photos?
Well, it was almost a month later. We were finally, because I was constantly trying to get a hold of somebody in the FBI. I figured, I heard all this stuff. Maybe somebody'd like to talk to me, but nobody seemed to want to talk to me.
Isn't that interesting?
And I was trying to also find out when I could go back and get my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I got an email probably 3 weeks in that the FBI was no longer in control of the property, that it had been handed over to the MGM grant.
What?
So yes. So I found whoever the coordinator was for the MGM grant, and I sent him several emails asking him to just give me some idea, because, you can't just stop everything you're doing and drive to Las Vegas. I needed some notice. I have a couple of businesses I run, and this is, I needed some notice. He refused to respond. Absolutely refused to respond. I think it's Live Nation. They really tried to communicate with us. They did the best they could. I have to give them kudos. And eventually I did get email from them saying, this was about almost 4 weeks later, you can come and get your stuff.
Right.
So we headed to Las Vegas, and I want to tell you, that was another whole new experience, because first of all, everything was still cordoned off. There was police there. And when we got there, we were told we had to line our cars out in the street. And remember, there was only 15, 20 vendors in the show. So We're not talking about a lot of vendors. But the way they did was staggered it. They allowed 6 or 7 vendors, or 5 or 6 vendors in one day, and then 5 or 6 the next day. I think there was like 5 of us. And they said, line up on the street, which we did. And then when they let us drive onto the venue, they made us give our cell phones to them.
Huh.
And so they took all our cell phones, and I said to them, listen, I have to submit some pictures to the insurance company. I said, I don't have much insurance on this, but whatever I can get, and I have to have some pictures. And so they said, well, we'll hold on to your phone, and we'll assign a lawyer for the MGM to shadow you when you take pictures.
Wow.
So we pull up in front, and interestingly enough, this is just a sideline, I became so obsessed with watching YouTubes after the shooting that somebody was posting YouTubes on a regular basis that was somewhere across the street, and they could see the FBI doing stuff and, putting circles on the floor and stuff. And I actually saw an FBI agent carrying this big turquoise ladder. And I said, that's my ladder. I recognize my turquoise ladder.
Wow.
So, and the reason I bring it up was the first thing I noticed when we got there was my ladder was gone.
Huh.
And anyway,
but Susan, sorry,
that was the least of it.
This picture that we're seeing of all the stuff in the booth, so this was just sitting here for a month?
Yep.
Your merchandise?
With no cover. Yep. You're looking at $40,000 worth of merchandise that was just splattered all over the place. It was a disaster.
Wow.
And lots of stuff missing, and things like our coolers. The ladder was gone. I mean, there were boots everywhere on the floor. It looked like people had gone through boxes and tried on stuff and threw it on the floor.
Wow.
And it was just a mess. And actually, Live Nation, I I was upset, and I said, don't ask me why, but the thing that really bothered me was my ladder was gone. And Live Nation went and got a ladder and gave it to me.
That was nice of them.
Yeah, they were really nice.
Joe Napoli said that as well.
I was stuck on that.
Yeah, Joe Napoli said that as well. So in the photo, if we zoom in, there's a very high resolution photo. This was taken with a cell phone, or how did you take this photo if they confiscated your cell phone?
Well, the interesting thing is that, I'm kind of, like I said, being the age that I'm at, I was real happy with the cell phone I had, but that I lost the night of the shooting. So the very next day I had to go get a cell phone. Of course, I got the latest cell phone with this wonderful camera in it.
Got it.
And so when we were there, we saw the bullet holes, but we knew we couldn't take pictures because, I've got this big burly lawyer shadowing me everywhere I go. And I said, well, I'm just going to step back and take an overall view of the booth. And that's when I got the pictures of the bullet holes.
Now, what do you think about these bullet holes? I'm surprised there's only 2. It would seem like perhaps...
Well, you can actually see another, looks like, if you look, there's that one big one, then on the right there's one, and there's kind of like a little indentation. This was not wood. This was some sort of composition that was pretty solid stuff.
I see.
And then I did find one in the back. When I looked at the trestles really closely, there was another one all the way in the back.
Well, I mean, these look like they could have...
These are contraband pictures. I'm not even supposed to have them.
I hope we don't get a strike for showing the pictures.
Well, they're my pictures. They can strike me. I don't have a YouTube channel. So.
Right. It's an incredible story, Susan. Jim, you've interviewed Bruce Paddock, and YouTube commenter here is curious to know if you have any insight as to why he referred to his brother as Stefan.
Boy, I'm trying to remember his use of that. I didn't recall that. He certainly was very animated and opinionated about what he thought happened. And I just read in the police report that they do summarize his interviews with the FBI. The FBI interviewed Bruce for about 8 hours, and all the family members were interviewed, and that is in the latest report. But, Bruce, he's convinced, as he says, he did it over too much hookers and blow. That's what Bruce said about his brother. Now, it is interesting that we have the 3 women that were registered to the room. We still don't know who these people were. First names were given out. There's certainly speculation that they were prostitutes. There have been prostitutes that have been interviewed regarding having supposedly had sex with Paddock. We also uncovered something very interesting when you listen to and watch the body cam video of the first couple officers that were in the room and taking inventory of their room, that one of them discovers a vibrator. And they even had kind of an odd moment between each other because, they were kind of on edge and they're looking at anything that's electrical or has wires. And he said, what's that thing over there? And he says, it's a vibrator. And the officer says, really? A vibrator? Yeah, a vibrator. So did this guy go out in an orgy of violence and an actual sexual orgy before the violence? Appears to be possible. He definitely was a demented person.
Why would he register the names of prostitutes with the hotel? That would seem to provide, it's illegal to have a prostitute, so putting her name on, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, the only thing I could think of is it would allow them potentially to get a key and access the room if they were going to be arriving before he was arriving. I can tell you, as we know, it's not difficult to get up those elevators. There's no security there. And, talking about MGM and so on and their culpability in this, it doesn't appear that they had any extra security in place in light of this event that they were co-promoting going on across the street. And even when I visited it, and I know that you visited also, Jason, there was no extra security even a couple months after.
It's crazy.
You would think just to place people, they would put guards now at the elevator banks that at least ask for your key. Nope.
Yeah.
Can I mention something about
Please.
the security of the property, please?
Yes.
My associate and I carried all cash in fanny packs. However, other vendors had cash registers. And I want to tell you that not only were we pilfered, everybody I talked to that had cash there, one of them had several $1,000s, all the money was gone, every penny. So they lost all their cash, and everybody lost merchandise and goods. And this was supposedly being protected by MGM. So I have to say that MGM, even a month later, didn't give a hoot.
Not only that, we've heard that they're suing some of the victims, right, Jim?
Yeah, well, first of all, it appears that they were protecting the property from anybody taking pictures for a potential lawsuit. If MGM lawyers were there guiding people in and watching cell phone pictures, that's because they were concerned about anybody there taking pictures for the potential lawsuit. But yes, in one of the most bizarre turns of all in this case, MGM a couple weeks ago began suing their own customers who attended the concert, the victims of this, suing them in federal court under a strategic move that I've spoken to multiple lawyers, and I'm also a lawyer, and I can't quite figure it out. It's a real stretch of an argument, but they're actually, it's MGM plaintiff versus, and then there's the names one by one by one of everyone who attended that concert named as a defendant in these various federal lawsuits by the MGM.
Well, I mean, I would say this is pretty standard procedure of lawfare that we've been seeing going on all over the place. People who are dishonest liars like to initiate lawsuits to intimidate people and to chill their efforts to investigate things or to sue them. I mean, obviously, this is absolutely disgraceful behavior on the part of MGM. It remains unclear if there was anyone in the MGM or their management who knew about this. We've heard about stock sales that happened in close time proximity to this event, sort of shorting or anticipating a drop in the stock. And certainly if anybody from MGM knew anything about this beforehand or is complicit in covering up facts and details, let alone initiating these lawsuits, this is one of the most horrendous actions a corporation could possibly take. It's pretty disgraceful, Jim.
Yeah, well, and let's talk about the defense, what they're trying to hide behind, and how it shows further collusion with the Las Vegas Police Department. They're arguing that something called the Safety Act that was passed in 2002, just after 9/11,
right,
and it protects manufacturers of technologies designed to protect against terrorism. The MGM is arguing that, well, gee, we hired a security group to defend the perimeter of the concert, you know, a basic security company.
right,
And that therefore they employed anti-terrorism technologies, and we as the purchaser of that service cannot be sued due to the Safety Act. The Safety Act was designed to protect these manufacturers against suits because people are going to be deterred from making technologies to try to protect against terrorism if they feel they can be sued if it doesn't work, right? So it made sense, this law, to protect the manufacturer and then also protect the buyers. But for MGM to try to hide behind this and say that, oh, because we hired the security company,
it's a stretch.
Somehow the protection of the Safety Act. But an interesting wrinkle of it is the Safety Act is all about terrorism. So it only applies if there was an act of terrorism. Well, the FBI has been very clear, including as recently as 10 days ago, saying this was not terrorism. Yet Sheriff Lombardo, when he's asked the question at his press conference last week, he says that it was terrorism. So
weird.
It seems pretty obvious that he's trying to help the MGM in their case against the victims. He's siding with the MGM over the victims in this case by calling it terrorism. And I'm trying to find the quote here. He basically says, yes, it was terrorism because it was directed at a certain demographic of people and intended to cause harm, including injury. Well, that's not the definition of terrorism. Let me tell you what the definition of terrorism is.
Yeah.
That's unlawful use of force and violence against persons or property to intimidate or coerce a government, the civilian population or any segment thereof in furtherance of political or social objectives.
Right.
Here are the political or social objectives of Paddock. The FBI is saying that he's a lone wolf. It wasn't terrorism. There was no conspiracy. And so there was no political or social objective. Lombardo says, oh, well, it was targeted at a certain demographic of people and intended to cause harm. That's his definition.
But at the same time, he's saying he doesn't know what Paddock's motive was. So everything that Joseph Lombardo says is basically pure nonsense. Let me ask you this, Jim, from the legal standpoint, so that I and the people watching understand clearly. This Safety Defense Act, whatever it is, the terrorism thing, that's essentially saying that if you're the company that manufactures the X-ray machine at the airport and somebody blows up the plane, you can't sue the X-ray company because their machine didn't detect the bomb. It's got nothing to do with the MGM Grand hiring people to protect a concert.
Correct. Yeah, it would protect the manufacturer, and it would also protect the airport. So in other words, you couldn't sue the airport and say that your metal detector didn't work. But if the airport failed in security in some other way, there's not blanket protection just because they had the metal detector. MGM is trying to claim some type of blanket protection simply because we had this one group that was providing security. But the argument about MGM is that they failed to secure their own hotel. They've got policies that prevent guns being brought into their hotel. Well, this guy brought 22 weapons up to the 32nd floor. How was that policy being enforced? Clearly, MGM thought it was a good policy to have no guns at the MGM, yet how were they enforcing their own policy when he was able to bring 22 weapons into the 32nd floor?
I would have to say, Counselor, they are enforcing it not at all. And it's just a disgraceful situation. MGM is really a company that people need to scrutinize and decide if they want to. I certainly will not be staying at an MGM hotel anytime soon. Susan, was there anything that you wanted to share with our audience or with Jim and I before we wrap it up for this evening?
Well, I guess I feel very much like both of you do about that. I watched that presser with the sheriff in real time, and I was trying to drink a glass of water. I almost choked on it. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe it. It was like, and, you know, I can't get it out of my head that I heard with my ears from the police little handheld, whatever he had, one down, two more. I heard it as clear as can be. So, you know, what can I say? And I know what I saw.
There's also been no good explanation for this explosion that you heard first.
Never. And I heard that explosion so clearly. And there's never been an explanation of the three, what sounded to me like 12-gauge shotguns in a row, 3 shots in a row. And I heard them so clearly.
Well, I think that people should definitely tune in to Hidden Truth Show podcast. Where can people find that, Jim?
Yeah, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, anywhere you listen to podcasts.
There you go. So people should be definitely tuning into that. You can go to hiddentruthshow.com and find all of the links. And people can, of course, also follow Jim on Twitter. I've shown his Twitter page a couple times during the broadcast, but he is right on there at
you also
Jim
have
Breslo.
A YouTube channel, and you can see the Bruce Paddock full interview on our YouTube channel.
Oh, there you go. So people can follow Jim on all of his various social media platforms there. I definitely want to thank my guests tonight, Susan and Jim. I think we're going to have to continue looking into this Las Vegas shooting, one of the most bizarre incidents really in the history of law enforcement in the United States. And thank you both for joining me tonight. Thank you everyone for watching. I do have one more show coming up tonight at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Myself and Quinn Michaels, only on Patreon, will be examining crazy evidence that Quinn has been uncovering in this book, My Friend Mr. Leakey. So people want to join us at patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/Rahula Club. Quinn has been uncovering some staggering evidence. Thank you both very much for joining me tonight. I will see you soon. Thanks everyone for watching. Have a great night.